The Prophet's Reward. Many people have different ideas about the Prophet's Reward. Some feel like the persecution that comes with the prophet is the reward. Well, that wouldn't be a reward. Because first of all, a prophet receives the word of the Lord, as does any other minister. When he receives the word, along with that comes a lot of persecution. It's his burden to bear. It's not everybody else's to bear. Imagine God giving a prophet a word, and he's been through all kinds of warfare and trouble, and then the people who receive that word have to go through the same thing. Now, it means whatever the prophet has gone through in order to receive that word, to give to the people, and the people receive that word, and in receiving that word, they receive the prophet. There's a reward that comes with that. It's the opposite to what the prophet went through. Whatever he experienced, whether it was attack in his life or physical attack or whatever it is, accusation, the people receive the exact opposite. Now, if you read Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and you read from verse 1, you see the two opposites. There's a time to be born, there's a time to die. And then he speaks about war and a time for peace and so on. That's how it is with the prophet. The prophet goes through war so that we can receive peace, the people can receive peace. Now, when you receive the prophet, it's really not receiving him as a person, but what he carries. He's a representative of the Lord God, and therefore treat him as if you would treat the Lord God in terms of respect. And the reason they persecuted the prophets, and it was spoken of so many times, was because they carried something that disagreed with what people believed, what was presently happening. They couldn't understand the future that he carried. Now, I'm going to read you something to get you to understand that when you bless a prophet, Jesus even spoke about just a cup of water. There's obviously something to do with providing for the prophet in terms of financing, supporting, looking after, because it's the gift of God. Now, I'm going to read you something in Hosea chapter 12. Many of you have heard me read this before. In verse 10, I have spoken by the prophets and have multiplied visions. Now, if you read that, you can go to any version of the Bible and read that. It means that when the prophet speaks, the one thing that happens is multiplication. Barrenness begins to disintegrate, disappear, and multiplication or acceleration takes place. That's one of the rewards of the prophet. So when you sow and you give, when there's a prophetic word bringing the presence of God to a people, when you do that, you are attracting the reward that comes along with that word. Whatever he's prophesied will come to pass in your life. That's one of the rewards as well. So multiplication is one of the rewards of blessing the prophet, giving the prophet, and receiving him in the name of a prophet. Remember something, you can receive me in the name of Kim, the name of Clement. That's not the same thing. When you push aside that familiarity and you say, I'm receiving this guy now in the name of a prophet, he's come with the word of the Lord. You don't worship me, you don't do anything like that. You respect, you honor, you take care of the gift that God gives you so he can bring upon your household multiplication, acceleration, remove all the things that are in the way. Remember the woman that recognized that Elisha was a prophet or a godly man. And she says to her husband, I recognize and perceive that this is a godly man, a prophet, carries something. And he passes by here. I'd like to make a room for him so that he can rest when he comes into the city. And she was a notable woman. She was well off financially. And so she made this room. They built this room, put a table, a lamp, put a bed there so he could sleep, he could eat, and they could feed him. Now, that was her gift. That was her way of saying, I'm going to take care of the prophet, or more so, what he carries, the word of the Lord. And she made this room. And so when Elisha would come by, he would go to the room and sleep. And One day, out of the blue, he says to his servant, "What does this woman need? What does their household need?" He offers a few things. He says, "Look, I have influence with kings and leaders. Does she want me to go and approach a king, a leader about something for some special favor?" And her response to him is, "I am well off. I don't need any influence. I don't need any authoritative figure to come and bless me." And that's all she answers. And the servant comes to Elisha and says to him, "However, there is one thing she does have need of. Her husband is old, and she cannot have a child. They have no children." So Elisha then speaks a word and offers her the reward that comes from her taking care of the prophet, and that is that she will have a child about this time next year. And of course, we come to find out she has a boy, a young boy, and that's the prophet's reward. Now, I'm going to take it a little further. In other words, the prophet gave her a promise because that she was taking care of him. And that promise then was her reward, which she received. A few years later, that same promise, the young boy dies. And she comes to the prophet and says, "I told you not to lie to me." And Elisha goes to the room, which is the place of her provision for him, and the boy is on the bed. So what she's really done is she said, "This was the promise God gave me, and this is the gift I gave the prophet. This room, this bed, this lampstand, this table. So I'm going to lay my promise that the enemy is now attacked on my gift, my offering." And I blessed the prophet with. And of course, you know the story. The prophet comes to the child, lays on him, and the child comes back to life. And so the prophet's reward takes it even further. When you're attacked, that prophet's reward or presence is able to bring back that which the enemy attacks. So it comes back to life. So there are many different ideas about the prophet's reward, but to me, it's whatever he carries in terms of the positive, what he's fought for, you can receive. And then, of course, there's the personal issue. If there's something barren in your life, he will bring it to life and make you fruitful. Take that as a promise.